Alrighty, and we're on.
Hello.
So, I'm here with Fran Bavaro. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes.
I'm always very particular on pronunciation because, so when I do ring announcing or commentary, I will always go back and go and check in with people and it's like, okay, how do I pronounce your name? And typically I'm 99% of the time really, really good, and I've only butchered one or two names in my entire career so far.
Pretty good record.
But when I do butcher it, I butchered it really, really well. So if anyone's seen that video that I put up, I apologise. And to Onyetika, whose name I butchered, I apologise. But yeah, Fran. So part of the reason, one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the podcast was because my wife isn't into Jiu Jitsu or combat sports at all.
Okay.
Right? And for some reason, she came across your profile and then she was like,
on Instagram?
Yeah, on Instagram. And it was one of those ones where I think, you've drawn a moustache on yourself.
I know exactly which one it is.
Okay. And she's like, she's like, this girl's got an interesting Instagram. And so then I was like, oh yeah, I've seen Fran compete. I've been at Subversion when she's competed a few times. And so shout out to Julian who's invited me out. And then, so Alta, who I work for, we were there at the last one. But yeah, you were competing at Subversion. I'm like, okay, yeah, it'll be interesting to get you on because I know that you're also really big on Australian Girls in Gi and
massive advocate for women in jiu-jitsu in general and women in all sports.
Yep. So yeah, let's sort of give everybody a little bit of a synopsis, and we can sort of dive into that a little bit as well. So, where did you grow up? And yeah, did you grow up in this area or?
Grew up in the good old inner west, Sydney.
Yep.
Been here most of my life, all of my life really, and I've just only recently in the last couple of years moved out with my partner Michael, who a lot of people might know him more as Mako, Mako Photo, instead of Michael. But yeah, moved out with him a few years ago. We have a dog Oreo now, got our own little family, and yeah, so Sydney born and raised.
Okay. And so Bavaro, what kind of a surname is that? Is that
it's Italian.
Italian.
You couldn't tell by the nose.
Oh. Well, look, it's never right to assume, right? It's just one of those things. It does sound like an Italian name. I can Bavaro.
Yeah, that's exactly how you would pronounce it. If you were in Italy. So my family comes from Apulia, which is the heel section of the boot.
The heel section of the boot.
Yeah, so you imagine Italy, the shape of a boot.
Yep.
We're from the top of the heel.
The top of the heel. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the heel.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, have you been back?
No, I've never been actually.
Never been
in my entire life. I was meant to go.
Yep.
Had booked everything in the cursed year of 2020.
Oh no. So it's something that you want to do.
Definitely want to go back.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to go and experience it. Yeah.
Do you still do you have any family over there, or do they all move over? Oh, so
no, got a lot of family over there. Got some in America, and I've also got some in Canada. So they've come here, some of them to visit. I've been to America and Canada, and so I've visited family there a few times. Yep. Which has been really, really nice. But I have a lot of family here too, and we still follow a lot of very Italian cultural stuff. So
when you say Italian cultural stuff, give me some examples. Is your dad smoking meat in the backyard or something?
Not so much my dad. My brother is now. But we do every year we make the sauce.
Yep.
That was one of the first reels that I made. Was I did a series of our sauce day, which starts at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then keeps going until maybe 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
And so when you do a sauce day, how much sauce are we talking about? How much is made?
Enough to last a year for multiple families.
Wow.
Yep. So I think one of the biggest year that we did was about 400 something bottles of sauce. So yeah, took the whole day. It's kilos of tomatoes.
And then so crushing tomatoes.
Yeah.
And
so we've got the very old tomato squashing machine.
Yep.
It's a whole process. Check out the reel if you want to see it.
Okay. So then, was that something that okay, I want to ask this first. Were your parents first-time migrants to Australia, or did their grandparents migrate?
My grandparents migrated here.
Yep.
And one set of them met here. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. So yeah, it's one of those things like, you know, the old saying, birds of a feather flock together.
They did actually all flock together. Yes.
So then for you, so you mentioned you have a brother. Do you have any other siblings or?
I do.
Yep.
So I've got an older sister.
Yep.
She's now got a kid and another one due very soon.
Hey.
I have a brother.
Mm-hmm.
He's my twin brother.
Twin?
Yep, I have a twin brother, and I have a younger sister as well.
Okay. So then, so with your twin brother, I'm a little bit curious because, you know, they always say like twins have like this thing where they sort of, you know what each other's thinking or...
No.
You guys are like total opposites?
We are total opposites. You couldn't get two more different people. But one thing that we do both have is we're very competitive growing up, very much so with each other.
Yep.
But then also competitive with other people. So we work in the rare occasions that we are getting along, which is more so now as we're adults. But we actually work very well together as a team when we're competing against other people.
Yep.
And we compete against each other very well too.
Yeah. Okay. So then, out of curiosity, who was the first one out? Was it you or your brother?
He was the one. Yep.
Does he hold that over you?
Yes. Yes. All the time.
He beat you.
He made us 6 weeks early, so we were actually born preemie.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was a tiny baby. It was like 2-point-something kilos.
And then what about him? What size was he when he came out?
It was a bit bigger than me. Yeah.
Okay, so he was like absorbing,
Yeah.
hogging all the nutrients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was like, I need freedom and you have no choice. You're coming with me.
Yeah, fair enough. So he busted out and then there you were. So how many weeks preemie were you?
6.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
And then for you, like, you know, growing up, so having a twin.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
It's actually funny because, so, you know, being very traditional, the girls, we did dancing growing up. So I danced for 13 years before I started Jiu Jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother Chris did soccer, and then he actually did Jiu Jitsu as a kid. I think he started around 10 or 11 and did it till maybe like 13 or 14 or something like that. And I really clearly remember thinking at that time, maybe I should, you know, voice up to my parents and say, oh, I wouldn't mind trying that with Chris too. But I never did because I was shy. And that will forever be something that I'll just think about. Oh, what if I had started at 10 years old? Imagine.
Yeah, but sometimes it's like you don't want to peak too early.
That's true. He definitely peaked and then he left and then went back to soccer.
Yep.
But it did make for made for an interesting time because we would, you know, often rumble around, and it was always pretty even in my books. And then he did jiu-jitsu, so then he obviously gained actual skill. So then when we would rumble around after that, he would win, despite my best efforts. And then I started jiu-jitsu, so now on the rare occasion that we just play rumble, he just knows to give up. He'll like instigate it and then I'll turn it up a little bit and be like, okay.
I've had enough. I'm going to go back to soccer now.
I don't want you to actually like rumble with me because I'll know that you'll put on a rear naked choke or something, so I'm just going to walk away.
So out of curiosity, and I think about this in terms of my own kids, right? But when you and him used to rumble as kids, did it end in tears?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. I mean, there was 3 of us close in age, my brother and my younger sister, so there was always 2 against 1, so one of us would be in tears, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's funny because, like, you know, I've got 4 and it's girl, boy, girl, girl, but the older 2
so similar dynamics.
Yeah, kind of. So the older 2, they're about 2 years apart each, or 2.5 years apart each. And so, but the older 2, when they, you know, will play fight or whatever, like the oldest one, she'll get to a point where she's like, I don't want to play anymore, kind of thing. And then my son, obviously, you know, if he loses, and because she's bigger than him at the moment, he often loses.
Yep.
He'll, like, you know, burst into tears on the bottom. And like, my wife is always like, why aren't you stopping them? I'm like coaching them instead. Like, come on, where's your underhook? Where's your underhook? You got to get up, you know? Where's your gable grip? And so, you know, like, I'm probably not the I guess, the parent that's going to stop them. I'll just
I
like,
don't know. I wish I had direction.
yeah, well, like if they're going to fight, right? Like I'm just like, if you're going to fight, well then fight. Like just fight.
But
and
do
then
it safely.
do it safely.
You
You
know
know,
what you're doing.
we'll do it on the mat.
Yeah.
And we'll let you get it all out. And then if it ends in tears, it ends in tears, right? And then let's just move on.
No,
right?
I have, even if it did end in tears, I really think of them only as fond memories, to be honest.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
in retrospect.
Good. All right. So that to my wife, see, I'm not effing them up. I'm not effing them up.
It's bringing a sense of closeness and bonding to your children.
Hopefully-
somehow.
Hopefully,
They'll
yeah.
get over it.
So then, okay. In terms of like your parents, right? I need to ask this question. Did they have a favorite?
You know when they joke about the whole middle child thing?
Yeah.
It's not a joke. Yeah, so the dynamic is the eldest. She's the first grandchild on either side. So she was obviously had the most responsibility. She was the most mature. So she was often our, babysitter as we were children. So she was, the trusted one. Then, the younger sister is the baby of the family. So the baby, you got to take care of the baby, got to baby her. And then Chris, my brother, was the only boy. So, in Italian and a lot of Woggish family, when there is only one boy, the sun shines out of his ass, to put it bluntly, because he's the only one that's going to carry on the family name.
Yeah.
And my grandmother especially doted on him because he would, she'd always feed him food and he'd eat it. He'd just keep eating and she spoiled him. So I was the middle child, but it was worse because there was two of us, but I was the only
So middle child syndrome, and you were the slightly more forgotten middle child.
Yes. So I was just the one in the corner, people pleasing and making sure that I could just keep flying under the radar. But also don't forget about me.
And then, okay, so then when it comes to I want to go back to this because I'm a bit curious what kind of dance that your parents put you through. Yeah.
So I started with ballet and then jazz, a bit of tap, quit ballets. It's just, I had a interesting teacher who told 10-year-olds off for eating too much fries, and we were all sticks at that point. So my mum was like, yeah, no, you don't need that kind of BS in your life, and I'm very grateful to her for realizing that. And so she pulled me out when I was complaining about it, and then so I just stuck with jazz and tap. I really liked tap.
Yep.
Tap was cool.
And do you find that coordination and the flexibility and stuff, has that helped you with Jiu Jitsu?
Yeah, the flexibility has helped a lot. I also dabbled in pole dancing for a bit, and that requires a lot of strength. So that really also built up my upper body a little bit and my core strength. So that was really good. It just meant that I was very athletic my entire childhood life, I guess. Very flexible, especially when it comes to, now inverting, being stacked, or my legs being split doesn't make me uncomfortable at all. And I just have a bit more, I think, awareness of my body and my limbs.
Yeah. Okay. So then, when it came to school and things like that, so were you and your brother in the same classes and things like that, or did they split you guys? Or
he repeated a year very early on, so of course that gave me a sense of superiority over my brother.
Whoa, that's a pretty big call from a school to split up twins. He needed a little bit more time. I mean, he might have shot out of the barrel first when it came to mum giving birth to us, but he wasn't ready for life throwing at him. So so I was always a bit more studious and mature than my brother, so I excelled a bit more in that department than he did. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So then what, when it came to your report cards and things like that, I always like asking, what did your teachers say about you?
average.
Yeah.
I was very boring.
Okay.
I was very boring. I was neither too, I got a bit better, but I was just always sitting in like the middle of the class, and I was just always too quiet.
Yep.
So I would just, as I said, fly under the radar.
Yep. And that's probably that middle child, or the lesser middle child syndrome, even slightly worse.
I have psychoanalyzed myself, yes.
Oh, you have?
Yes.
Okay, let's digress and talk about that. So, well, what did you do? What was it, an assessment type thing, or you had somebody do it?
I actually studied, I did social work.
Okay.
And a master's degree. So part of social work in general is doing a lot of self-reflections, reflexivity, and critical self-analysis.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's so that you can understand your own thoughts, biases, your own opinions about things, and then you can understand how that might impact you when you're speaking to your patients, clients, whoever it is that you're working with, so that you can avoid being judgmental, be more open-minded, but also that there's no transference coming across.
So when you say transference, that's like that living vicariously through another person kind of a thing,
or just like assigning like a persona to that person, so like if you are someone who just had a really homebody kind of mother, and then you miss that person and you find another like older woman who's very caring towards you, you might transfer the role of your mother to that person. So that's the kind of transference that I'm talking about.
Wow.
And it happens both ways. So counsel therapist to patient-client, and also patient-client can also transfer that back as well.
Okay. And then was it very confronting when you went and had a look at yourself like that?
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to, no one wants to like deep dive, especially into their own thoughts and actions, but it made sense. It made sense. There wasn't like a lot of surprises. It was just more like, oh, that's why I am this way.
Were there things like, because they often talk about like, these things that happen in childhood that then lead you to have certain things in your personality, right? Like, was there a lot of that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it still relates to a lot of what I'm doing now. So a lot of my, childhood, again, was growing up side by side with a twin brother. And you can immediately see the difference of how we were treated boy to girl when everything else about us was the same. So I really clearly, even though I couldn't express it or understand how I was feeling at the time, felt the inequalities of being a female, and how that might put me at a disadvantage, or give me less opportunities, or give me some other different opportunities, compared to if I was a boy.
Yeah, that's always, I always find that to be like an interesting thing to think about, because I think about that with my own kids as well, right? And I was just saying this just to Daniel just before, like when I had my kids, when my wife gave birth to my kids, I had my kids, right? So shout out to my wife. But for me, it was like two very distinct feelings when you have a boy versus a girl. And there's a comedian that like, he put it the best way. It's like when you have a son, it's like, I would die for this boy, right? And then when you have a girl, it's like, I would kill for this girl, right? Like it's just two very different emotions.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, it's like, when my firstborn came out and it was a girl, I didn't know what it was. And then when it was a girl, like I just burst into tears, and I had like this feeling like, you're so precious and I want to protect you, and then when my son came out, it was like Rafiki in The Lion King, like that kind of a moment. And so like, I think, there's definitely,
But why do you feel that way?
Why do I feel that way?
Yes.
Well,
What is it from your background and your childhood that has made you have those two very different feelings when your son was born and when your daughter was born?
Well, so me and my brother, I've only got one brother and he's older, 7 years older. I don't think there's anything to do with my childhood. I think it's just,
or maybe society's influence on you, perhaps.
Do you think it's society? I think there's a primal thing there, like
could be a combination.
Yeah,
could be a combination.
Like, and don't get me wrong, like I when I think about my kids now, it's like I need to make sure that I don't baby my daughters, because I want them to be able to fend for themselves.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you know, I can't be too tough on my son because I don't want him to hate my guts.
Yeah. So
Right.
you have these like societal norms that you are now kind of being challenged, and we understand a bit more about them. And so now you're sort of very consciously thinking about them in the raising of your children.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think, you know, like there's benefits of having moderation in everything, including moderation. But, you know, like if I was too tough on my son, like I'd never be able to foster a good relationship with him. Like I think that'd be pretty obvious. You know, if you're always just like, you know, trying to hold him to this high standard when all he wants is to be a little boy and be cuddled, right? Like that's just, you know, I think you have to have some self-awareness to sort of realize that, right? And I think, you know, that was a mistake, not necessarily a mistake, but that's how maybe the generation before my generation was probably brought up, where it was like, you know, if you're the man, so to speak, your job is to provide for your family, and, you know, you don't get really told that you're loved or anything like that. It's just like suck it up and do this.
The emotional side gets neglected.
Yeah. Whereas, you know, I think, you know, because like we're very fortunate in society now, where especially living in Australia, most of us are coming from fairly decent circumstances. You know, so from that perspective, it's like you can almost be a little bit controlled in the level of suffering that your children experience, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I would say it's the difference between having voluntary and involuntary suffering, because if you never go through hardship, you never actually grow.
I can agree with this.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you never experience hardship, you'll never develop as a person. But then that doesn't mean that I want my children to go through some fucked up things, right? Like you know, you don't want that. You want to be able to control those experiences.
I do think it's impossible to protect them from everything, because anything is going to shape, you know, who you are.
Yeah.
And even though I've said all these things about myself, I'm not, you know, resentful for my upbringing, because I know that I had it a lot better than other people. I'm not resentful about the inequalities that I experienced, because at the end of the day, it just made me who I am. Just made me be more passionate now in this sport, especially when it comes to women. And that's where a lot of my passion and advocacy for women in sport comes from. Comes from my childhood and my upbringing. So if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be the person that I am today.
Yeah.
So it's not all bad.
Yeah. No, that's true. All right. So then to sort of continue on the track, you know, like when you were going through school, like in terms of your peer group, like I guess what kind of a group was your peer group, and where did you sort of fit into the whole schooling?
The cliches of school. Yeah, high school. I definitely was in more of the athletic group, so we do like rep soccer and OzTag and all those kinds of things. But generally, I felt quite lucky in high school. My group was, you know, the kind of group that was mostly friends with everybody. We were pretty much all wogs, so we were a bit sheltered in our ethnicity and very ethnocentric. But it made us really close, and it also made us able to just be really friendly with all the different groups. Yeah, some more than others, but yeah, we were sort of that group that got along with anyone. So we were a bit more. We were athletic, but we also were very academic too.
Yep.
And so we weren't that seriously academic group that we just, you know, didn't really live a life outside of school. We had a lot of fun. We were a lot more immature, just kids, you know, on the weekends or after school, ride your bikes around, go play soccer in the park, that kind of thing. So very athletic, very chill.
Yep. Yeah. So then when it came to like the end of high school, did you have any idea what you wanted to do after that?
No, I was really stumped, to be honest. I went through like the book of recommendations of like that lists all the different universities and all the degrees in Australia, and I just pretty much went like process of elimination. Yeah, yeah, I was really stumped. I didn't really know where I wanted to go.
Yep.
At that point, I even considered like signing up to the Navy or like the Army because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to do an arts degree because it just sounded like a waste of time. So instead what I did was a type of arts degree, but in humanitarianism. So it was called International Development Studies. The university that was at, it no longer exists because it was a bit of a train wreck of a course. And I was the second or third trial year that it was there for. I think it only lasted like 6 or 7 years in total, to be honest.
So what uni was that at?
Australian Catholic University. Sorry about the negativity, but shout, it was a fun time.
Okay, so what was the reason for choosing Australian Catholic University?
So it was actually close to home. It's like 10 minutes away.
Okay.
My sister had gone there, and like a lot of things in my life, I took a lot of guidance from my older sister.
Yep.
And also the degree sounded fun because you got to do an overseas trip as part of it. So that was fun.
Yep. Okay, so where did you choose to go for that?
So we went to, there was a few different options. I chose East Timor.
East Timor?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. And so what was that like?
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting. So East Timor is actually the newest country in the world. So they pretty much the government was formalised in 2000 and, oh my gosh, I'm going to get this wrong. I've forgotten the year. But they just had a lot of war. So it's a really, it's a third world country. They don't have a lot of facilities, although their public Wi-Fi was better than ours at the time that I went. So that was weird. There was like, you know, we'd be staying with family and the house would just be like concrete and then a mattress like laying on the floor and, you know, in the middle of the bush kind of thing. There's not really like proper roads or anything, and there'd be like a chicken in the yard, and then one night that chicken would be gone, but you'd be having chicken for dinner.
There we go.
So,
the circle of life. But then you wouldn't get any more eggs.
That's right. So
or maybe the chicken stopped laying eggs and that's why the chicken became
the
dinner.
chicken had to go.
Yeah,
It wasn't performing its duties. No, so it was a really good eye-opening experience. As I said, I was living a very sheltered life during high school with my group of Italian buddies. So it was a really eye-opening experience for me. We travelled around a lot. We learnt about what other non-government organisations and government organisations were doing to provide assistance in the country, and learnt about, you know, their culture, their history, the wars that they went through, things like that. And then we worked on some programs together. We tended not to do any actual aid or assistance because we wanted to stay clear of things, what's called volunteerism or the white saviour complex.
Yep.
Wow, this has gone back to my uni days and terms, everybody, if you want to learn about social work. So volunteerism is like those volunteer experiences that you do where you like go to Africa and you build houses for people, which sounds all well and great, but actually it's not. It's usually actually detrimental to the local village and the culture, and it's usually only done to give satisfaction to the white person that is going there, to make them feel good that they're helping in the world.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm a bit curious, why is it detrimental to the people that are there?
It impacts on, so if you have people coming in to build houses, you're impacting on local labour, so that means local people have their jobs replaced.
Yep.
They're often using materials that are imported, not well researched, maybe not suitable to the environment that they're in. You know, just because something works in a first world country doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be the best option or the most suitable thing for a third world country. So what was really learnt a lot in our social work degree, actually not the international studies one, was the person that knows what's best is them living in that society, them living in that culture. they know what they need the most. The same as, like Aboriginal people here. When you have people coming in and trying to tell them how they should be living their life and what they should be doing, well, actually, they have a wealth of knowledge. They know what their problems are. They know what they need the most. You can't just have someone outside coming in and saying, oh, looks like you don't have, proper hospital systems. Let's build one for you. But actually, they've got their systems in place.
Yeah. That's interesting because I think, when we think about society in general, right, and I guess if you think about some of the welfare systems and things like that are aimed at trying to help these impoverished people, so to speak, we find that, it still hasn't really addressed the problem in the long run, right?
That's right.
All you've done is you've enabled them to continue to wallow in whatever circumstance that they're in.
Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of fantastic non-government organisations and charities out there. There are. I just, advise you to do your research to see exactly how funds are being used, whether they're a for-profit or not for-profit always helps. Check that one out. And just be aware of, the white saviour complex. People like to feel like they're doing good and people want to appease that part of them. So just, be mindful and make sure that you are understanding, what are the long-term benefits, what are the long-term goals of this organisation. Any sort of volunteerism that is like a couple of weeks long or a month long, that's not enough time to support or aid a program in a foreign country. That's not enough time to learn about the culture, to understand their needs.
It's almost, I think it's almost like you actually, people have to be able to help themselves. There's a difference there in terms of are you chasing this particular outcome? And the way that you sort of describe it is that volunteerism sort of aspect is more centric around, they're looking for an outcome. Oh, I want to feel good that I've done something, right?
Let's build children schools.
Yeah, as opposed to instead offering the people that are there the resources to help themselves. Pull themselves out of whatever circumstances that they're in. There's a book that I read, I'm just trying to remember which title it was, but it could be The Rational Optimist. But it was talking about how basically in society, maybe it's not that one. But okay, whichever book it was, I'll have to go back and try and remember which one it was.
And then tell me.
Yeah, I'll come back to you on it because it was quite interesting. It was talking about how essentially society is founded on this idea of cooperation, right? You can't have society without cooperation, and you can't have cooperation without trust, right? So the whole idea. I guess in terms of why societies form is in essence off the basis of trade, right? That somebody has something and that could perhaps be beneficial for us, and we might have something that's beneficial for them. So then we can form some form of cooperation to then facilitate the exchange of that particular thing that can help each other, right? And so then, through that facilitation of trade, other opportunities are then increased because, both, if we say there's two tribal groups and one of them's trading fish for the actual, fishing materials, whether it's fishing hooks or something like that, so that sort of, allows society to sort of go forward. And we can sort of see that even in today's age, right? The fact that people can make a living doing Jiu Jitsu as an example, right? If you think about what are the real world sort of opportunities for Jiu Jitsu, there is really no practical benefit when it comes to you're not going to use Jiu Jitsu to go hunting, right? You're not going to go and strangle a cow and then go, or forget about the cow because the cow's domesticated. You probably could strangle a cow.
Not modern jiu-jitsu anyway.
You're going to pull guard on this cow.
Follow its legs.
Well, you jump on its back, right? But then, I suppose, that's what rodeo is. And we know that ends pretty badly majority of the time, right? So society has advanced to this point where we can do some pretty esoteric things to, survive. Like even whether it's me doing a podcast, right? Like it's a pretty esoteric thing. That doing the actual podcast itself, there is no real world impact in terms of if I had to survive, I could not afford to spend any time doing a podcast. Like if I had to go and forage for my food or hunt for my food. So the benefits in terms of society advancing is that it creates further opportunities for us to pursue these really esoteric sort of endeavors, right? And I guess, so why you make me think about this is because there's this really big thing about, how do we help people? And, a lot of people would be we want equality, but then, you really need to delineate between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. Because if you're given everything, you don't appreciate it anyway, right?
Yeah, the difference between equality and fairness. Yeah.
So I guess that trip to Timor, did you find that you as a person changed quite significantly from that?
Yeah, I had massive cultural shock when I came back to Australia. It just put a lot of things in perspective for me about life and opportunities, and I realised that I had been living in a little sheltered bubble. So when I went back and hung out with my friends, I was like, okay, wow, we're really just...
superficial.
It gave me the ick.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, I actually couldn't handle being around my friends and some of my family for a long period of time. Those that didn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in Australia, we come from a really, really privileged place. Most of us have, had great childhoods, not ever wanted, not ever been, going hungry or, suffering malnutrition or poor access to healthcare or poor schooling or, not enough funds to even buy a soccer ball to play with, things like that. So we've had a lot of luxuries in our life, and we really do take that for granted. I mean, I take it for granted a lot. And it was only coming back that I realized how much we did take that for granted, and how, because we have so much luxuries, you become, what am I trying to say? Then the superficial things are the things that you start to stress about because you can't afford to stress about them. Of thinking about where's my next meal going to come from, that kind of thing. So I really couldn't stand to be around a lot of people.
Were they what's happened to Fran?
Oh no,
she's so cold to us now.
Yeah, I was just really really withdrawn. I remember I'd gone away on a trip to the Blue Mountains or something with my friends, and they were all hanging around and talking about life, and I just thought, oh my God, this is so naive, so boring. I mean, you're talking about life, but you're not really getting into any depths. You're not really talking about real world life. You're just talking about your sheltered life. And then I realized, that's actually how I've been this entire time. And, over time, as I got accustomed again to my life of luxury, and the impact of being in a third world country wore off, you return to that kind of norm. But at the time, I couldn't handle all the superficial stuff. I couldn't handle any bitching or, that kind of,
you became one of those
boy drama. I was over it.
There are people dying and you guys are just caring about... Was that what you...
That was me. Yeah, it's I lost my earring. There are people dying in this world. Oh yeah, that was literally me. And boy, did that make me feel like I was better than everyone else. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Especially my siblings.
Yeah. Look, I think that... I always say, whenever you go overseas, and you get to see how other people live, it really does... provide you with this level of experience and maturity that you would never otherwise get, because you only know what you know.
That's it.
And then, you go out and you go to a place that, whether you can't speak the language there or they live very differently, the cultural norms are so different, the societal norms are so different, and then you just go, wow, people live like this, and society can function in this way.
That's exactly how it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Timor was a great trip for me. For my learning, and also a fun tip about East Timor was like before I went, I'd actually looked up to see if there were any jiu-jitsu gyms there.
Yeah.
And I found a couple online, and then when I got there, I tried to find them in person to see if I could go train. And then I found out that all of I don't know if this is still the case, but it certainly was back in 2015, all martial arts was actually illegal.
Oh, wow.
Because they had just come out of a lot of war.
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting for me.
Yep. So did you have any withdrawals?
Definitely. It was a month that I was there for.
The longest month of your life. Jiu-jitsu.
And I was a fresh blue belt, I think, at the time. So you're in that peak of super confidence, then super into jiu-jitsu, and that becomes your entire personality. And then I had to leave it for a month, and yeah.
So what happened after you came back from East Timor? I guess, did you finish that degree?
Yeah, I finished the degree. Didn't get a job out of the degree, much like most of my peers. Was working in a gas, water, electricity company.
Mm-hmm.
A really soul-sucking company because everything is about profit and making money.
What were you doing for them?
I was just working in admin and scheduling, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But it was horrible because I had just gone from one extreme to the other, and it just was not what I wanted to do at all. I just was doing it basically because I had the opportunity to, and then so decided to quit that and go back to uni, which was a tough decision because when you work full time and then you go back to uni money.
You mean no money?
Yeah, pretty much. So then I went back and I did my Masters of Social Work, which was a great decision.
Yeah. So, okay. And then, so in the Masters of Social Work, that's when you got the time to actually reflect and psychoanalyze yourself.
And I just felt like I put myself back on the track that I wanted to be on. I've always been, a people pleaser. So I have this caring, wanting to help others personality. That's part of who I am.
I always find that the psychoanalysis of yourself, the self-analyzation or self-awareness, is to be such a big thing because I often talk about this from the perspective of when you're born, you've got your siblings, if you have siblings. If you don't have siblings, you get your parents or whoever's looking after you, and they're the ones that sort of provide a lot of influence into your personality and who you are.
Yeah, and your knowledge and your bias and how you perceive things.
Yep, and then you get older and you develop your peer network, and it's your friends that then influence, what you know and what you like and all that sort of stuff. And then it's only really that first time that you either move out of home, and then there's sort of two things that can happen there. It's either you spend all your time partying and because your first taste of freedom, and it's okay, there's no one here to tell me what to do, and you can do whatever you want, and you just go off the rails a bit, or you actually sit at home and then you actually have to think about do I like myself as a person, right? And so so for me, I got that quite a little bit. I got that pretty much towards the end of high school because I often talk about my parents had some issues, but my mum had some mental health issues as well, and so I had sent her overseas thinking that was going to help her, and then she wouldn't come back, and my brother had moved out, and I basically didn't talk to my dad, so
you by yourself.
Yeah, I was by myself
for the first time.
Yeah, and so I had a lot of time by myself to actually reflect on who I was as a person.
It's pretty confronting, isn't it?
Yeah, look, for me, I also, was able to sort of distract myself a little bit. So, with martial arts and with work and with uni and everything else, I was busy all the time. I just was always doing something, right? And
is that on purpose, though?
Yeah.
Are you avoiding things?
Well, it's not necessarily to say avoiding things. It's got to pay bills, right? I had to put myself through uni. I had to
But it does also provide a nice distraction from having to dive deep into your own personal thoughts and feelings, because it's hard and people do avoid it because it's not nice to do it, but it's good to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was me for the longest time. And then, I finished uni and just went straight into the workforce, and then was working in the car game for the longest period of time. And I think the time that I sort of then started to really reflect more was basically when I started traveling further for work, and like I would have like an hour and something in the car. And, you know, sitting in the car, you got two options. You can listen to music, or you can sit there in silence like a serial killer.
Or you could listen to podcasts
No,
like this one.
This was before the podcast time.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is before the podcast time. You know, we're talking before, you know,
before the phone. So it was either you had to have your CDs or your tapes prepared.
yeah, it's basically CDs, tapes, to the radio, right? And you know, we didn't have data, like in the sense of like, you know, being able to download a heap of stuff. You know, like I think back then, like iPhones were out, but like companies weren't using them yet, because we were still on like Nokia phones when I was at Toyota, and then we went to like I think when I moved to the other next company, it was like Blackberries. And then, then the Blackberries died, and then iPhones became the thing, right?
Yep.
And like, I think only when the iPhones became the thing that's when I started to get into podcasts. But yeah, before that, I'd be like, and I had a lot, like there's a time when I was working at Toyota, I was like what they would call like a district sales manager. So I used to have to drive to like all the different dealerships.
Yeah.
And like, I'm talking like Tamworth, Coffs Harbour.
That sounds like fun.
And so like lots of time in the car, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like you're sitting there and you don't get like the radio stations you get in Sydney. You're now in the country, right?
Yeah.
And like I remember, like, you know, I was listening to one radio station about how, you know, to keep your cows nutrition up, you need to get the salt lick going, and the benefit of having the salt lick was that the cows would lick the salt, and then they'd go and like when they'd have their manure and poo that would come out, like that would then provide fertilizer back to your grass, and the grass would grow again, and then you rotate your cattle. So that you keep anyway
information that you didn't know that you didn't need.
You know, and so like you have all this time in a car by yourself, like you actually start spending a lot of time reflecting, and like I often tell this story about although I had a strained relationship with my dad for a very long time, like there was this one time where I basically like had this dream, and it was like, okay, this isn't hurting me anymore, like, you know, I don't forget what you've done. But like, I don't hate you anymore, kind of a thing. It was just like, I woke up and that was my epiphany. And I know like, some people may never get to that, and other people like they might hold that resentment for a very long time, and other people like maybe it never bothered them to begin with. But that was just what happened for me, was that one day I woke up and I was just like, it doesn't hurt me anymore. And then like, I think I was in the car with my dad at some point, and I said that to him, and like, I think it was quite an emotional moment for him. But like for me, it was kind of like, I don't hate you. Like, it's okay. Like, whatever. So yeah, like I think from that perspective, like the fact that you had to sort of go through, you had to confront yourself and then do this. They're taking photos. Hello. It's always weird when that happens. I have a camera going. But anyway, sorry for people listening. It's like you have no idea what's going on, but Fran and I are just laughing because people are just taking like photos of us podcasting. Like to actually have to force yourself and confront some of those feelings. Like, it's one of the best things that you can do, because you can run from it your whole life, and you'll never grow from it, right? And you'll never like get over that difficulty of like having to face yourself. And I think, being okay with yourself and not hating yourself is probably one of the best things you can actually work out in life. And it's kind of funny because like religion does teach a lot of those aspects, but religion's obviously not very favorable nowadays. Like, a lot of people don't seem to like religion. But, like the very premise of like, I guess in terms of Christianity, of like, everybody's equal and everybody being broken to some extent. Right? Like, it's like, that's just a part of life. And so, it's actually trying to tell you something quite profound, that it's okay to be broken and it's okay to be as you are. And, that idea that, you are loved is actually, it's actually quite powerful, but a lot of people don't really like that message nowadays. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, because I guess going to ACU, I have to ask, and being Italian, right? Like, does that mean that you grew up Catholic?
Yeah, I had a lot of Catholicism in my life. Yeah.
Yep.
And I do try. I'm not very active, but one day I hope to be married in a church, so I do try to keep involved in the faith a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, but I know I'm I'm actually I'm pretty like I've had a lot of self-reflection about religion as well.
Yep.
And I actually have learnt about a lot of other different religions.
Mm-hmm.
And while I am what I would say that I am Catholic, I'd say that there are some religions that I actually like a lot more than Catholicism.
Yeah, well, this is where I usually go on this rant about how, like, I think all religions actually have, like, come from psychedelic drugs. I don't know what you were expecting me to say, but I typically, you know.
It wasn't psychedelic drugs.
Yeah, like, I think, like, I think there's books about this, and I guess, you know, people that listen to those sorts of podcasts, they often talk about this because, you know, what sort of helped me to sort of come to this belief that a God exists. There's a few reasons, and apologies for people that have heard me talk about this before, but if you sort of think about the idea of like that things are neither, like, matter is neither created nor destroyed, it has to be like it's just it's changed, like the chemical reactions or whatever you want to call them, or so like when it comes to like creating a universe, it doesn't come from nothing. There has to have been, there's something that was always there, and all that's happened is it's being converted into what we know as the universe, right? And so, you know, it wasn't like there was zero and then there was something. Mm-hmm. The something always existed. It was just, you know,
different.
It was different. Yeah. Like, you know, X was always equal to X, but now we're saying that, you know, A plus B equals X, right? Or A minus B equals X, or whatever way you want to put it, but X always existed, right? Yeah, like, so it's, you know, bringing out the true Asian in me here. Yeah, and then, like, so then the second thing that sort of influenced me to sort of really think about this on a deeper level. So I would say I grew up more Buddhist.
I love Buddhism.
Well, the idea, you know, in terms of, like, you know, karma.
The ideas of it.
Yeah, the ideas of in terms of karma, the ideas in terms of, like, you know, I think the idea of reincarnation is an interesting one. I would actually take that, you know, one step further, and I guess the way that I sort of process this is, like, if you think about the idea of infinity, infinity is so large that there is another dimension, or whatever you want to call it, where, you know, you and I are probably having this exact same conversation. There's another version of this where you and I are in the like we're in the opposite positions, you know, and the way I sort of think about that is, like, when it comes to, like, this idea of God, we're all made of God, right? And it's kind of like the same way that I said that, you know, you can't go from nothing to something. There was always something there, right? That something was always a part of God, right? So whether you take a piece of God and you create the universe, and then you take a piece of God and you create Adam, and you take a piece of Adam, which is made of God, and you create Eve, right? They all came from the one place. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I like that as an idea, and I think, you know, where it sort of gets lost in the reincarnation, I don't think it's necessarily that, you know, I go and die and then I come back and, you know, I'm like my grandson or something like that, or whatever, you know, way you want to think about it. I think that we are all having this human experience, but we all end up in the same place. You know, we all end up back in, I guess, you know, this sort of like tapestry of God. We all end up back as a part of God. Mm-hmm. And, you know, some people, you know, would take, you know, I guess from the religious perspective, it's like they would go like, well, what about the bad people? Don't they go to hell? And it's like, well, probably to a bad person, like, being with all the good people is hell. Right? So
yeah.
So yeah.
But it's very similar in most religions, you know, like the dream time for Aboriginal people, for example, it's pretty much the same concept.
Yeah. I don't know much about the dream time. So, you know, apart from, like, the limited that they teach you in school.
Basically, you know, there was the rainbow serpent, which is not apparently the true translation of their word. But that's the closest that they could come up with, English people could come up with, I guess. And all of creation is connected and all of life is connected. So pretty much the same concept.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I got there from a psychedelic trip, but and I'm not saying that, like, I don't wish that on anyone, right? Like, you know, I sort of laugh about it now, but like when I went through that experience, it's like you live and die like over and over and over. It's like not fun to live and die like 10,000 times. You come out of it and you just go, everything's meaningless.
Sounds really exhausting.
Yeah, like that's how I came out of it. I came out of it like, well, this whole existence is meaningless. Like we go and do things, and like, you know, the reality is if you're lucky, you might get 80 years, you might get 100 years, and then you're dead. And then so what? And you move on. Life moves on, and everything continues on. And
life continues.
Yeah, and so like I went through this phase where Ecclesiastes was like my favorite part of the Bible, because it talks about like everything being vanity, and my wife was like, "Oh, here you go again, talking about Ecclesiastes," right? So, but yeah, like I think, you know, you do have to realize that a lot of what we do in life is actually we're doing it for very vain reasons. You know, we chase money because we think it's going to afford us a better life, or better status, or better this, or better that, or we're providing and giving perhaps our children a better life, right? We do it for vanity's sake, you know? So a lot of our pursuits, you know, what people want to get good at jiu-jitsu for a pretty vain reason, like to be like, yeah, I'm good at jiu-jitsu, right? Or I'm good at combat sports.
I want to be a world champion.
Yeah, right? So I guess, you know, it's probably a good time to digress and talk a bit about the jiu-jitsu journey for you. So your brother was doing jiu-jitsu, and then, you know, you were saying, you know, there was a part of you that wish you spoke up and said, hey, yeah.
Imagine 10-year-old Fran starting jiu-jitsu. Wow. Could have been like, we could have been like Mikey and Tammy Musumeci.
So what age did you actually start?
I started at 18, so fresh out of high school.
Yep.
Finished dancing, didn't want to go to a gym to keep fit because, I mean, I don't mind them now, but at the time I thought gyms sucked. And I always had wanted to do a martial arts. And the place that I started at was just right down the road from where I lived. So I thought I'd just give it a go.
Yep.
And I had a lot of fun. Yeah. So I tried both Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu when I first started. And I liked Muay Thai more for the fitness aspect. I thought it was harder with cardio. But I had a lot more fun with Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah.
And why do you think you had a lot more fun with Jiu-Jitsu?
I think there's a little bit more freedom and creativity involved. Also a lot more intuition involved, especially like as a beginner when you don't really know proper techniques. It's a lot of like just basic core survival instincts, things like that. Whereas I felt like Muay Thai was very structured and with the technique and how you had to kick and punch. And my kicks were great from dancing, but my hand-eye coordination, forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, it actually took me a long time to really get into jiu-jitsu though. When I started during uni, I'd go like during the day classes and there wouldn't be a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And then when I started the night classes, they're just, I mean, it's like over 10 years ago. So I was the only girl on the mats, as you know was usually the case back then. And so a lot of the time I just spent, just surviving and getting pretty much like beat up every day. And yeah, it kind of sucks, and it's not very motivating for someone to go back when you're just, like wrestling big dudes every day, just trying to like survive.
Yeah.
Like at one point I was just doing it because I had paid for it.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, I've paid for this fortnight, so I have to do like at least 2 classes to make it count.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And where I first started to get into it was when I had another white belt girl start. So her dad had like brought her along, and then we became friends. And that's really what made me stick around a bit more, because I had a friend that I wanted to go hang out with at night.
Yeah.
And then started becoming more friends with some of the guys as well, once I, got over the fact that they're not all just trying to kill me.
Yeah.
And then I would go to the like advanced classes, or not the advanced, intermediate classes, once I had like my first stripe. And I was doing that for a while because that was the only one that I could make. And then I remember like after a few months or so, I could make one of the beginner classes again. So I went back to a beginner class, and then I was shocked that I could actually do stuff on other beginners. And I was actually executing moves and able to get, you know, my first sweeps, my first passes, my first submissions on, you know, bigger guys. And then that's when I was like, oh, okay, like this can actually be for me. It's not just
works.
for the big, it's not just for the big dudes. I just had to improve my technique a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I started to, you know, get a bit more nerdier about things. Started competing, and then once I started competing, that I was pretty sold.
Yeah. So when you say you started to get a bit nerdier, what do you mean? Like
just nerdier with looking at how, you know, strategies can play out, how much, I mean, because when I first started, it was just like you do the technique like this and there is no variation. But once I started to know how to explore a little bit more and realize I could have a bit more, like once I realized that just because I was being taught the technique in the way that a 6 foot, 100 kilo guy would do the technique does not mean that I had to do the technique in the same way. And once I realized that, then I was able to get a bit more nerdy about it to try and figure out, okay, how can I actually make this work for me and my body and my strength and my size?
Yep. Yeah, it's one of those interesting ones where I think, you know, a lot of people, they the sooner that you can sort of work view every opportunity as being a technical learning. So like all those losses, or every time that you end up on bottom, or every time you lose a position, it's not because the other person's better. It's because you have a technical flaw, like a technical deficiency. That allows you to then have take more accountability in terms of like what it is that you do and how you approach it to actually improve.
Yeah, so you're not blaming someone else for your technique not working.
Yeah, right. Like the simple reason is that you're shit. No, but right.
I mean, pretty much, yeah.
Like that's the reality, right? Like and it's always funny. It's like, you know, and it's not to punch down on like people that are starting the sport. It's just to understand that the only way that you improve at something is by taking accountability for it. And it's like, okay, if I want to make this sweep work, I really need to invest the time to making it work, right? Like if I want to get this technique to work, I need to invest the time to make the technique work. I also think that, you know, jiu-jitsu instruction has come a long way, you know, and you can probably speak to this, right? So, you know, you're talking about, you know, being shown technique in class. Like there's so many different modalities and methodologies that people apply now, whether it's like, you know, task-based games or, you know, people playing more from certain positions and saying, you know, positional-based sparring essentially, you know, and like saying, okay, we're going to work on this, you know, here's maybe some options and then let's play around with the position, you know, like trying to make it a bit more fun.
Yeah.
Because, you know, drilling a move for reps, like it's going to work for some people, but definitely doesn't work for everyone, right?
No, and that took me a long time to realize.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So was that like sort of how your instruction began? It was a lot of drilling for reps?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was pretty much it, you know. It wasn't until I started cross-training and going to other gyms that I realized, okay, actually different people teach this same move in different ways and I don't have to do it in exact this way.
Yep. Yeah, well, one of the hard things is like that's why they would always say if you want to learn like good technique, you got to learn from somebody who's small because like they don't have the advantage of size and strength, right?
Yeah. And like that's no diss to like bigger dudes. They just have never known what it's going to be like to be a smaller, weaker person on the mats and having to execute that move. They just don't know how much more effort it's going to be involved if you don't have the technique that's the most accurate for you.
So when it came to competing, I'm very curious about, you know, what your first competition experience was like. And I guess, you know, and also about your mindset, you know, like how that's evolved over time.
Yeah. Well, when I first started competing, I actually, I was like a 2 or 3 stripe white belt, and it was one of those, really small martial art comps. Like, do you remember ISKA?
Yeah, Iska.
Yeah. So it was one of those ones.
I got DQ'd from the continuous sparring section for too much force.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Anyway, shout out Iska.
And it was like, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what comps were like. They were much less efficient back then. We didn't have smooth comp. This is before smooth comp came out. So I was sitting there for like 5 hours or something. I didn't know when I was going to be on. I was just like nervous jitters the entire time. And then I had one match, and the lady that I fought was almost half my size and twice my age. So it was a pretty swift win, but nevertheless, the feeling of the win was something that I quickly became addicted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then went on to do like a lot more competitions. And basically I did them for self-validation, because it was hard for me to measure myself and my progress against people in the gym, because they were mostly all big dudes. So like I remember like we'd do grading for our stripes, and I remember going to my coach and be like, I don't know if I should grade. Like I don't really feel like I'm good enough to go to that next level, being just a stripe, which, doesn't really count for much. White belts, it's not a big deal. But yeah, and he's like, well, you're doing this competition on the weekend. Do the competition and then, come back and we'll see how you feel. So I did the competition, and I did gi and I did no gi, and I did open weight divisions as well, because I figured, well, I roll with big guys all the time. Why not big girls?
Yep.
And I won quadruple gold at the competition. And so I went back to my coach, and he's like, well, you've got no excuse now, you have to grade. And that was something that I always remember, because it's really hard to compare yourself and your progress when you're just rolling with really good people all the time, and bigger people and stronger people. So it was a way for me to validate my own personal growth and journey.
Yep.
And that's where I started, like, and then I learned, there's like nationals, there's states, you can go overseas and compete. And then I started, it was like the world just slowly kept opening up, and I could see like how much further can I go. So then I started doing like the bigger ones. Like I did Pan Packs as a white belt, won a few golds there, was like, and then that just really like, opened it up for me. Started competing against blue belt, had a bit of a rut as a blue belt, then went to worlds, things like that. But just always, I've always liked competing, because it's always helped me in training. It's given me the motivation to train hard. It's given me a goal to work towards, and I like having, goals that I can achieve. And it does give me more motivation to want to be in the gym. And when you have a goal, when you're getting beaten up by big dudes all the time, like, it's okay, because you're working for something.
Yeah, there's an end in sight.
When you're in the car driving home in your tears, it's like, it's okay. This is just gonna make me better, so I can achieve that goal. So it's what would get you through the good nights and what would get you through the tough nights.
Yep. So, out of curiosity, has there actually legitimately been tears in the car rides home?
Oh, for
after
sure.
training?
What do you mean?
Yeah?
Doesn't everyone experience tears in Jiu-Jitsu?
No. I don't know. I've definitely never really felt like that. Like, I think a lot of people, when they get into those plateaus, the ruts, right? Like, I sort of flipped the way that I viewed those ruts, because I think, the plateau always comes before the breakthrough. Yes,
this is what I tell all of my students when they are going through this exact moment. I say, you're just going through the plateau now because you're building up and you're working on something new and you're preparing, and then you're going to take that next step up.
Yeah, right? So then, if you think about it that way, then it's like, the breakthroughs, like, you know that you're naturally going to feel good about them, so you don't worry about those. Now it's like you actually get excited for when you're chasing a plateau.
Yes, I do actually. I'm like, why am I stuck in this position? Why can't I progress? I'm like, it's okay. My final form hasn't arrived yet.
I was going to say something, but it'll get me cancelled. I was going to pull a Tropic Thunder. I don't know if you ever watched Tropic Thunder. But
I have watched
my
it. It's
final
been a while.
form, you never go full retard, but that's what I'm going to do. So okay. So then when it comes to you and how you teach jiu-jitsu, because I know you teach here and you teach at Forza as well. Shout out to the guys at Forza as well. But yeah, we're at Movement today. But yeah, so like, how does that influence your teaching methodology? Like, how does that change? Well, your experiences, how have they informed the way that you articulate information?
I'd say my teaching has evolved a lot from when I first started teaching. When I teach, I like to focus on the whys of things. I want to give you the reason why I'm doing this and what the purpose of this particular movement is, or what the purpose of, this placement of my limb here is, so that if you can come up with a better answer for it, then it will help you progress. So I will teach very specific techniques, especially when I'm teaching lower belts. So I'll change it up for lower belts and higher belts. So if I'm teaching lower belts, I'll teach very specific techniques, step by step. This is how you do it. But then when it comes to higher belts, I'll give them space to have a bit more freedom to explore. And I want them to. And if they come up with something, I want them to show me and help me get better too.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it, right? Yeah, because everybody's that's one of the beautiful things about combat sports, is that there's so many ways that you can solve a puzzle. And, being aware and savvy to what all those different ways are just opens up new pathways, right?
Yeah, so with higher belts, it's more like it's technique, but it's also concepts as well. And it also, gives them liberty to train what they want to train. I don't really want to have robots or mini-me's going around. I don't want all of my students to just only do lasso guard. I want them to, be individual with what they like and what how their games develop.
So then when it comes to you nowadays, in terms of competition and things like that, do you get nervous at all?
It depends. Not as much as I used to be honest.
So like
subversion.
Let's paint a picture, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, you're out the back, it's subversion,
Well,
Matt or George, one of them's got a camera in your face. You're about to do your walkout. What's Fran Bavaro thinking?
I'm thinking, stop thinking.
Do you already have do you game plan for your opponents, or do you just work out, what is your game plan? Or do you think about what your opponents are good at?
I am aware of, I didn't always used to do this, but now, there's very limited opponents that I have. And everyone has been around for a long time that you sort of generally know what someone is good at and what they're not good at. Or, you can, this person has been winning all of their matches from this, or this person has lost in this way. So I do know a bit about my opponents, but I don't tend to focus on that. I actually just want to focus on myself. And because I know in all the times that I have lost, I've actually known, in the weeks leading up to it, that would be my downfall.
Really?
Yeah, I've known, okay, this is actually a weak spot. And then I'll be training to I'll be training my strength. I like to train both strengths and weaknesses, and then I'll be rolling, and I'll be working on something specific, and then another problem will arise, and then that problem I'll see it becoming a habit because of whatever else that I'm working on, and so then I'll know, like, oh gosh, like when I get stuck in this position, it's actually really hard for me to progress or get back out of. So then I'm like, okay, got to be really aware of not letting that person get into that position. But, that always doesn't always go that way.
And then, so when it comes to your own game plan, are you like and I guess the reason why I bring this up is because when I've competed in jiu-jitsu, it's kind of been like the times I've done the best is when it's like, I don't really think too much about pulling the trigger. It's like, okay, I'm going to go for this. And then I've got my sort of like AB. Right?
Yeah.
Are you the same or?
Yeah, like when I was like white through to purple, I had a very specific mind map or flow chart. Actually, like if you go back and watch a lot of my matches, it'll be the same thing. Even like my dad would come and watch me, like on a rare occasion, he'd be like, "Why do you always pull guard? Like you're just always on the bottom the whole time. I don't get it." He's like, "Why are you always on the bottom?" And I was like, "This is my game plan. I'm putting myself there on purpose." And it would just be, hello, here's my game plan as white to purple belt Fran. It was pull guard, definitely do not get taken down. Pull guard, go to close guard. It would be an arm drag across to the back or to mount, from mount or from the back. From mount I will get to the back. And then it would be like a double lapel choke, bow and arrow, or lapel half Nelson. And that would be my very specific game plan. And if I ever went off track from there, my goal would to be get back on track so I can continue along my game plan.
Yep.
And so I did the same thing, and I still enjoy doing that. It's like a comfort. It's like a comfort game for me.
The old faithful.
Yeah.
It's like this old pair of sneakers that's like got holes in it.
Yeah.
It's like,
and then
but I love it.
It wasn't until like end of purple, brown, that, I had a lot of changes in jiu-jitsu. So I moved gyms and I changed training partners, and I just approached jiu-jitsu differently because I was preparing for different things. And then I started to really want to broaden my game and broaden I would train a lot of different guards anyway, but I wanted to execute more things and newer things in my game and in my matches. So then I started to train differently for it. Yeah.
Okay. So to switch gears a little bit, I was asking you before we started this podcast what you're doing for work, and we talked about aged care.
Yeah.
So I do want to touch on this because I think it's a little bit interesting. And why I think it's interesting is because I think we take old people for granted. This is just me being realistic, right? Like, because, I've done some podcasts with some older people. Michael Lyons was one, and he was like, telling me about some of the stories about like the Irish guys in the war and all this sort of stuff. And I thought it was very fascinating, right? And some of these accounts, like they could be first-hand accounts of things that have happened in that particular time. So I'm a little bit curious as to why you decided to go into aged care, and if there's any sort of cool stories that you've come across.
I just kind of fell into aged care. I did a uni placement at a hospital in a geriatric ward, and then from there found a job. So where I work now, it's for support at home. So the Commonwealth Home Support Program or home care packages, and it's basically to keep older people being able to be independent at home instead of going into nursing facilities. And it's tough. It's a really tough job, not gonna lie. It's gets pretty emotional sometimes too. And it's also a really interesting time in aged care sector at the moment as well. I say interesting, but for me personally, that means difficult.
So why is it difficult?
Because the government's currently going through a really big reform when it comes to aged care. So a couple of years ago, they did an audit into the quality of aged care standards, basically focusing on nursing homes because there was a lot of stories coming out of like neglect and abuse, and things like that. And so that's finally seeped into the government, and now they're slowly changing and reforming the whole system. So it is going to be changing by, I think, 2027. It'll be all different to what it currently is. But what that meant for me was I wasn't just, organising services for people. I had to now build a clinical understanding so that people could be safer at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, what sort of changes would you have to make for that?
It just meant that I've had to learn a lot more about clinical issues that might arise, things that are more common to our elder citizens, and there's a lot of complexities that might influence that as well. Just like there are complexities in life, there's drugs, alcohol, financial issues, mental health issues, disabilities. All those things make aging more difficult. And that's on top of aging being difficult in itself. So, the everything from, skin integrity, medication management, pain management, personal care, daily, how you do your daily tasks, live your daily life, all that has to be factored in.
Wow. And has it been I always wonder, when you're in those sort of environments, does it take quite a bit of a toll on yourself as well? Your emotional state, I should say.
Yes.
How
Definitely.
do you decompress from that?
I'm working on that still. I haven't really figured it out. Yeah, no, it's definitely impacted on my mental health being in this field. I struggled a lot with that last year especially. And then I realized that was impacting my personal relationships. So I decided to, do something about that. So I am working on trying to learn how to decompress. And I'm not going to lie, at the moment, a lot of it is just escapism.
Yeah.
Reading, escaping into books.
What kind of books?
Fantasy, because that's the best escapism.
Yep.
Watch a lot of K-dramas. Get into the Delulu life of a K-pop stan. So, yeah, escapism has been my current coping mechanism, which actually is not a bad one, but it's not the best.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. It's a difficult one because I feel like emotionally, we all have a certain capacity, right? And when that capacity is breached, it's like you don't want to go past the point of no return.
Yeah, because then it takes a lot of work to get back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was something that I've been really struggling with last year. And, on top of that, that would just be my day job. And on top of that, I'd have Jiu Jitsu. So I'd be working 9 to 5 and then teaching at night and then wanting to train and then not being able to train as much as I wanted to. And then there's not been a lot of competition opportunities for black belts in Australia locally. So then not having many goals to work towards, and those kind of goals of fitness, having those jiu-jitsu goals meant that I was training regularly, watching my eating habits, making sure I slept properly, and those kind of things that would help with, mental health care kind of went out the window and then was impacting on the work life too. Yep. So it was really hard to find this, balance. Yeah.
So then would you consider broadening your horizons and then competing in other things, whether it's combat jiu-jitsu or MMA and all these kinds of things, or?
In a complete segue, I've been lately getting back into dancing as a self-care thing, also for fitness, but also for fun.
Yeah.
So, I think as much as we might love jiu-jitsu as a sport, when it comes to self-care, it's not the greatest self-care strategy out there because sometimes, you're facing bigger demons and mental battles than you are in your day-to-day life on those mats. So it's not the best for self-care. So then I had to rethink my strategy around that and put less focus on, not being able to compete a lot, and put more focus into just what's going to make me happy and
what you
want
enjoy
to train.
Okay. So then, can we actually segue and talk about Australian Girls in Gi?
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff?
I'd love to talk about Australian Girls in Gi all day.
Okay. So because I thought it might be a good opportunity to bring this up. So tell me more about it, because obviously I'm a guy, so I'm not really involved in Australian Girls in Gi. But
so I remember, I think maybe I was a white belt or a fresh blue belt. They had the Grand Prix, which was like the first show in Australia that I saw personally, where it was like a showcase of matches, invitational matches, things like that, like Subversion, but on a far smaller scale.
Hey, Subversion had some pretty humble beginnings.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's true. So that was when I first was introduced to Jess Fraser, who is the founder of Australian Girls in Gi. And she was maybe a purple belt at the time. And she was my first introduction into a higher level female belt who was training and active and competing in the community. And then I started following her on her socials, and then found that she had created Australian Girls in Gi. And at that time that I found it, they were running these yearly camps, and it was amazing because they basically, so it was the first few I went to were in Melbourne. The first one I went completely by myself, as a fresh blue belt, and there were over 100 women on the mats.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was the first time I'd seen that many women training jiu-jitsu together. And it was also a bit like a school camp, because there were like cabins that you'd like stay in, so they'd provide the accommodation, and like you'd eat together in the dining room and then there'd be like, downtime and stuff like that, and then we'd train, we'd have morning session and night sessions and stuff like that. So it was you're just around all these jiu-jitsu people all the time. And that was I met a few people at that first camp that I went to that I still speak to now, that and still have those connections with, like Tegan, who's in Queensland, and also Pam, she's from Sydney, she's a Club Deluder. So, and it was the first time that I could, progress through ranks with other girls doing that alongside me. Which was fantastic. And then the next year after that, I went to the next one as well. And in that time, I'd started gathering a little group of girls around me at the gym. Not a strong bond, but just a little group. There was some girls that were there consistently. So I rallied them all together, and I was like, trust me, I went last year. It was so good. Let's all go together. So it took a bit of work and effort and, financial issues, but we pulled our finances in and we went. And so there was 6 or 7 of us, and we were, staying together. And it was the first time that we had formed a proper friendship within the group. And we, strangely enough, we bonded over sharing our stories of the one creepy dude at the gym. Oh, no.
Shout out to that one creepy dude if you listen to this.
Yeah, you really were the reason why we all bonded so well.
And if you haven't noticed, they all avoid you.
Yeah, pretty much. And then we realized that we actually really enjoyed each other's company. And still from that event, I have one of, some of the closest friends, these lasting almost 10 years, these friendships. Some of my closest friends were born from going to that camp. Wow. That was facilitated by Australian Girls in Gi. And now they're lifelong friends. And then not only, the friendship part at my gym, but also being able to see, black belts that I hadn't seen in Australia before, that I didn't know who they were. I didn't know that there were black belt women in Australia at that time that were, competing overseas and winning medals and stuff, because no one spoke about them. No one ever spoke about these women that had medalled on podiums internationally before men did it. And it was a shock to me to be able to see women like that, and then a privilege to be able to learn from them. I probably didn't retain everything that I learned, but the experience of being there and knowing, hey, there are girls that are this standard in Australia, we can do it, we can get there, was really awesome.
So do they just do the one annual event, or do they do other little events as well?
So they did like the one big camp, and then they do like open mats, and then they started doing competitions. So they have girls in gi, women's only competitions a few times a year. Now they've been doing, like since COVID, they've been doing more mini camps. Lately they've been traveling around to more remote areas of Australia so that more girls can get that experience as well.
Yep.
Because it's more remote and mini, it doesn't have like, the same effect as having 100 women in the room that you're training with. But what it means is that there's a lot more girls
who can access it.
Who can access it, and who can, form those bonds with other girls close to their area so that they can continue like their own training. And, it's been cool to like follow along on Instagram and seeing, oh, hey, like there's that awesome black belt all the way over there in like Western Australia. That's cool. I should go there and train.
Yeah. Well, it's also good to know where you can actually find people.
Yeah. So it's so Jess has really done like a wonderful thing. She has had a really big impact, I think, on women in the community. Just the opportunities that she's brought. And so when she runs these camps or when she runs the competitions, she's a firm believer in women getting paid, in Jiu Jitsu. So a lot of times what you'll see is like a lot of women, oftentimes the wives or girlfriends of gym gym owners, they do a lot of volunteer work, whether that's, being behind the desk admin or like teaching the kids classes, things like that.
Yep.
And you see that quite a lot. It goes like unpaid. So she makes sure that whatever event that she's running, everyone's getting paid appropriately. Everyone has the opportunity to work in that space. It's not, volunteer at all. And then the income that's brought in from, the camps and the competitions and things like that, it feeds back into the community. So they sponsor a few women like Hope, Hope, Douglas mainly, also Nikki, and a few other girls to go train overseas, do their training camps, be able to go to Worlds or Abu Dhabi and compete. They give those opportunities, which is great because then those women come back and teach those camps and are able to continue, that cycle of giving back into the community.
Yep.
With their learnings and with their experiences.
Yeah, that's cool.
So the fact that it just continuously is a process of building the women in Australia is fantastic, the way that she's worked that out.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Okay. So I guess, we've covered quite a bit, unless there's anything else you want to talk about.
With Australian Girls in Gi?
Yeah, or in general. Is there other things that I haven't touched on that I should be dragging out of you in this conversation?
I don't know. Probably, but I can't think of anything on the top of my head at the moment.
Yeah. So I guess, how do people... What's the Instagram handle for Australian Girls in Gi? Is it just that, or
I'm pretty sure it's just Australian Girls in Gi.
Yep.
Or maybe, good question.
I'll link it. I'll link it in anyway. So if you are watching, then hit the link
in
the description or whatever.
Yeah.
If people want to find you, how do they find you?
Yep, my Instagram handle is Fran Bav. I'm in a little bit of a slow process at the moment, but I like to make funny jiu-jitsu related reels on Instagram. So follow for a little bit of fun content. I promise I don't post that much of my dancing stuff on there.
People might be interested in the dancing stuff. I'm actually a little bit intrigued. So
are you?
Yeah, look, I think movement in general, like I think, so I view most things as skill based, right? So, you know, even when it comes to like I actually don't lift weights at all nowadays. I just don't have the time. So I most of my training is all just skill based stuff, whether it's like, you know, doing MMA, doing kickboxing, or doing jiu-jitsu. Like, so I just, you know, and you're right from the self-care perspective, because like, even from your own body's perspective, it's not really the best on your body.
No. And when you're young, it's hard to understand that. But as you get older and your body it doesn't recover as quickly.
I turn 40 next month, and it's like, I can't remember the last time I woke up and my lower back wasn't in pain.
Oh my gosh, yes. The lower back pain.
So actually, I'll show you a stretch after that has actually helped me with that. Like what I found is I need to lie on the floor and like spend a couple of minutes doing this, and then like after holding this position for a couple of minutes, like my back actually, it cracks, like something just goes click, and
nice,
then and then it actually
satisfying
feels
click.
Right, but it like you can't just force it, you have to actually just hold the position until it clicks. But yeah, like from a self-care perspective, like I probably should be doing a lot more than I do in terms of like just training and destroying my body, but
yeah,
I've done all right.
Yeah, I mean, still able to do jiu-jitsu, so that's good.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, it's great.